She had been raised to smile through scrutiny, to curtsy through chaos, but that day, something shattered inside Charlotte. What was meant to be a private interaction left her rattled, teary-eyed, and withdrawn. She didn't speak about it for days. But what she whispered to her mother that night changed the way Catherine looked at Camilla forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began during what should have been an ordinary engagement. One of those rehearsed, carefully choreographed palace events where every moment is documented, every smile measured. Charlotte, composed as ever, had been scheduled to stand beside Camilla for a brief meet and greet with guests. But what happened behind the velvet curtain, away from the flash of cameras, would never make the press release. Witnesses discreet yet disturbed would later describe a sharp exchange, a cutting comment from Camilla that visibly stunned the young royal. No one expected it. Not then. Not like that. Camilla's voice, reportedly low but pointed, carried just enough bite to turn a routine appearance into a haunting memory. One staffer recalled the exact moment Charlotte's expression changed, shoulders pulled inward, eyes cast down, lips pressed tight as if holding back tears. Moments later, Charlotte was seen alone in the corridor. Her composure had vanished. She was rubbing at her eyes, her small frame tense, her hands fidgeting nervously. A junior aide, barely older than a university graduate, approached her with quiet concern. No scene was made. No alarm sounded. But that staffer would later confide, in hushed tones, that what she saw that day stayed with her. Because it wasn't just a child crying, it was a child betrayed by someone who should have protected her. And that betrayal, whispered into royal silence, would prove impossible to contain. That evening, the quiet of Adelaide Cottage was pierced by a truth no mother ever wants to hear. When Catherine finally coaxed her daughter into revealing what had truly happened, the words sliced through her like a blade. Charlotte, through trembling lips, recounted what Camilla had said. The specific phrasing remains locked behind family discretion, but those close to the Princess of Wales confirm it was belittling, targeted, and deliberate. In that moment, Catherine didn't react with anger, she froze. A silence fell over the room, thick and immediate, and behind her eyes something hardened. She would not scream. She would not storm. But she would never forget. In the days that followed, Catherine's demeanor shifted. She attended royal functions with unbreakable calm, but the warmth was gone. Her smiles were brief. Her movements were calculated, and those who knew her best noticed a tension, a pulse of maternal protection humming beneath the surface. The staff, many of whom adored Charlotte like their own, began whispering. Not in outrage, but in sorrow. What they'd seen, what they'd heard, what they feared. The palace, once united in carefully constructed hierarchy, now began to feel like two different worlds. One loyal to Camilla's reign, and one devoted to the young girl she had wounded. As the whispers intensified, what had been a single moment of cruelty began to unravel an entire web of behind-the-scenes tension she had been trained to endure. But nothing could prepare Catherine for this when the enemy wasn't a tabloid or political scandal, but someone within her own palace walls. Between her crown and her child, she faced a choice no royal mother should ever make. And behind her poised smile, a storm was brewing. In the days that followed Charlotte's quiet confession, Catherine was haunted not just by what had been said, but by what it represented. This wasn't a fleeting moment of rudeness. It was a fracture, deep, personal, and deliberately aimed. And yet, she knew the rules. Royals don't erupt. They don't accuse. They contain. But every time she saw her daughter's guarded eyes, every time she noticed the hesitation in Charlotte's once confident steps, the mask of royal protocol slipped further from her grasp. She was no longer just the future queen. She was a mother, and that changed everything. Still, Catherine tried to play it the royal way. She raised the issue quietly with King Charles, careful in her tone, cautious in her approach. She hoped, perhaps foolishly, that a father might speak to his wife, that the patriarch might mediate and resolve what had become a silent crisis. But Charles, already battling public scrutiny and internal pressures, waved it off. Misunderstandings happen, he said. Charlotte must have taken it the wrong way. Camilla meant no harm. The conversation ended not with resolution, but with dismissal. And in that moment, something inside Catherine shifted permanently. William, when told, did not mask his emotions as well. He clenched his jaw, his voice tight, his silence louder than any condemnation. He trusted Catherine's judgment implicitly. If she said something had happened, it had. But he also understood the stakes. A public rift between Camilla and Catherine would ripple through the monarchy like a tremor. So he urged patience, calm, discretion. And though he stood by her in private, the look in his eyes revealed the war raging beneath his composed exterior. He too had reached his threshold, but he needed a strategy. Retaliation had to be silent, calculated, undeniable. Catherine, however, was done waiting. She began to surround herself with those she trusted most. Longtime aides, loyal staff, quiet allies who had served beside her for years, and who, crucially, had also witnessed the way Camilla wielded her position. Conversations were held behind closed doors, notes were taken, stories began aligning. And what Catherine found was not just validation but evidence of a pattern. Camilla's behavior toward staff, toward the younger royals, even toward Catherine herself, had shifted ever since her coronation. The warmth was gone, the facade was cracking. Now Catherine no longer cared for the optics. Her priority was Charlotte. Every decision, every whisper, every guarded glance was now rooted in one mission: to protect her daughter. If that meant confronting a queen, then so be it. If that meant unraveling a carefully curated image, then it was worth the risk. The silent war had begun, and Catherine was no longer interested in playing defense. She would move with precision, with control, but she would move. But Catherine wasn't the only one watching. Within the palace ranks, others began taking sides, and Camilla was losing her grip. They had held their tongues for years, watched the hierarchy play out, swallowed the politics of the palace. But after what happened to Charlotte, something inside them broke. These weren't just maids or aides, these were silent witnesses, now ready to speak. And their truth? It shook the monarchy. For too long, the palace staff had accepted the silent burden of service. They had endured icy glances, impossible demands, and shifting alliances. But this was different. The moment Queen Camilla turned her sharpness toward a child, the walls that once protected secrets began to collapse. The first whispers came from those who had served close to the queen consort, men and women who had once defended her rise, who had witnessed her transformation from controversial consort to crowned queen. But now, their tone had changed. Their words were no longer guarded. The leak wasn't a trickle, it was a rupture. Senior staff, many of whom had spent decades behind palace gates, began hinting at a culture of quiet cruelty. One former valet spoke anonymously, describing Camilla's inner circle as cutthroat, cold, and obsessed with control. Another senior dresser confessed she had been dismissed after raising concerns about how Camilla addressed the young royals in private. Their stories began to align. An undeniable pattern emerged. The incident with Charlotte, as it turned out, wasn't an outlier, it was the latest in a series of unsettling interactions. Staff recalled moments when Camilla had publicly corrected George for speaking out of turn, or belittled a junior footman in front of guests for a minor error. These things had been brushed aside, chalked up to stress, to position, to protocol. But no one was brushing now. Not after Charlotte. Because this time the damage was visible. This time the silence had consequences. And then there was Catherine. She didn't push, didn't ask for statements or declarations. She simply listened. Her calm, steady presence became a quiet source of strength for those finally ready to speak. Staff who had once feared retribution began to feel something different: respect. Catherine's belief in their words gave them courage, and with that courage came action. One by one, personnel began asking for reassignments. Senior advisors once loyal to Camilla requested to be transferred under William and Catherine's office. Aides who had worked alongside both households made their preferences known without a single word. They were choosing sides. Behind the scenes, it was a quiet revolution. The palace still maintained its glittering image for the world to see, but within its stone corridors, the dynamics had shifted. Trust in Camilla was eroding rapidly. The queen consort, who once commanded absolute authority behind the scenes, now found herself surrounded by suspicion. her influence leaking away like sand through her fingers. Conversations she was once invited into were now held without her. Plans were made without her input, and what stung the most loyalists she'd relied on for years now crossed the floor with quiet resolve. As the walls began to talk, Camilla sensed it too, and her response only fanned the flames. She didn't climb to the crown by playing nice. Queen Camilla's reign has always been built on resilience, strategy, and survival. But when she realized the staff no longer feared her, she didn't retreat. She struck back, and the move she made next sent shockwaves through the palace corridors. The whispers had become too loud to ignore, and Camilla could feel the power she once held slipping through cracks she hadn't seen coming. No longer protected by silence or deference, she responded with the ruthlessness of a queen who had fought too hard to let it all unravel. The first strike came quickly. Two long-serving staff members, both fiercely loyal to Catherine's household, were dismissed without warning. No explanation, no parting gesture, just a cold, clinical removal from their positions. It sent a message, one not hidden behind royal etiquette: loyalty had consequences. Then came the second blow, subtler, but even more chilling. Camilla allegedly pushed for changes to the structure of upcoming family engagements. The proposal, cloaked in the language of efficiency, effectively cut Princess Charlotte from several prominent appearances, citing a reassessment of her public visibility. On the surface, it looked like a harmless adjustment, but behind the scenes it was seen for what it was: a deliberate attempt to silence and sideline the young princess at the center of this royal firestorm. An internal memo soon followed, redrafting access protocols for the younger royals, new rules about who could accompany them, who could speak on their behalf, and who needed direct clearance from Camilla's office. Staff read it with disbelief. For years, such decisions had rested with the child's parents. But now, Camilla was attempting to assert dominion over the very space where Catherine and William held the deepest authority. It wasn't just a flex of power, it was a provocation. Behind palace walls, tensions hit a new peak. According to sources, a closed-door confrontation between Camilla and Catherine turned icy and decisive. Camilla, ever controlled, reportedly accused Catherine of undermining the unity of the family. Catherine, composed but unwavering, refused to back down. There were no raised voices, but the air was thick with finality. This wasn't just disagreement. It was war in whispers, in glances, in orchestrated decisions and private defiance. William, learning of the situation, took swift and quiet action. No grand gestures, no public declarations. But his message was unmistakable. In a meeting described as firm but respectful, he reminded his stepmother of boundaries both personal and institutional. Charlotte's upbringing, her protection, her emotional well-being, those were not up for debate. And while the room remained polite, the undertone was clear: any further attempt to control or manipulate the narrative would not be tolerated. The fallout behind the scenes was immediate. The palace PR team, already reeling from the growing tension, scrambled to contain the narrative. But leaks continued, each one more damaging than the last. Whispers of internal battles, sudden staffing changes, and a queen consort losing her grip all began to surface in carefully worded press speculation. What Camilla had tried to bury was now blooming in full view. But even Camilla couldn't predict what would come next, not from the crown, but from a child who refused to stay silent. She's only a child, yet her words carried the weight of a nation. In a quiet room surrounded by those who loved her, Charlotte finally found the courage to speak. What she revealed didn't just confirm suspicions, it devastated an entire royal illusion. The tension had been building for days. Catherine had done everything in her power to shield Charlotte from the storm quietly raging within the palace. But something in her daughter's eyes told her the silence was becoming heavier than the truth. And so, one evening, with William beside her, they sat Charlotte down not as future monarchs, but as parents desperate to understand. At first, Charlotte hesitated, caught between fear and obedience. But when she spoke, her words were clear, unwavering, and full of emotion no child should ever carry. She repeated what Camilla had said in that corridor word for word, and the air in the room shifted. William, who had remained composed through countless crises, was visibly shaken. Sources later described him as crushed and furious. This wasn't hearsay anymore. This wasn't politics. This was personal. This was their daughter. The weight of Charlotte's admission shattered any remaining illusion that this could be resolved behind closed doors. Catherine, ever strategic but deeply emotional, reached out to a trusted figure who had once served Queen Elizabeth herself, a former lady-in-waiting who had witnessed the palace's darkest turns and most private pain. The meeting was discreet, held away from cameras and ears. What was said remains confidential, but what emerged from it was clarity. Catherine left more resolved than ever. She would not allow history to repeat itself, not on her watch, not with her child. Still, the institution moved as it always had, quickly, decisively, and with ruthless efficiency. Attempts were made to suppress the matter. Internal communications warned against escalating a family misunderstanding. Palace aides were instructed to monitor media narratives closely. But this time, it was too late. The truth had already spread, and those who had heard it would not forget it. What began as a whisper had now become a quiet roar. At Charlotte's school, her teachers had noticed subtle changes. A girl once confident and open had become more introspective, more reserved. There were no dramatic outbursts, no visible signs of trauma, only a quiet dimming of spirit. The staff, while professional, offered subtle gestures of support to Catherine. They knew something had happened, and they didn't need the palace to confirm it. Their allegiance, like so many others, had shifted. That night, after putting Charlotte to bed, William and Catherine sat together in silence. No titles, no obligations, just two parents staring at the cost of silence. And in that moment, they made a vow not to the crown, but to each other and to their children. They would no longer remain silent. Whatever came next, scandal, backlash, or rebellion, they would face it together. Because protecting their family was no longer a preference, it was a necessity. And in the aftermath of Charlotte's brave confession, the real battle within the monarchy was about to begin, one that would leave no crown untouched. He had tolerated, absorbed, and endured. But now, William had reached his threshold. What began as a private wound now demanded a public reckoning. For the first time, the future king put his foot down, and Camilla wasn't ready for the blow that followed. William had long been the image of quiet strength. He had kept his composure through scandal, heartbreak, and duty. But this time it was different. This wasn't a tabloid headline or a PR disaster. This was his daughter, and the pain she carried could no longer be buried beneath royal protocol. In a private meeting with King Charles I that had been delayed too many times already, William made his stance clear. There were no raised voices, no theatrics. Just a cold, heavy ultimatum. Camilla must step back. Her influence over the children ends now. William wasn't asking. He was declaring. For Charles, the demand struck at the heart of his carefully preserved balance. To him, Camilla was more than queen, she was his partner, his anchor. But William's words left no room for compromise. He was no longer speaking as a son. He was speaking as the heir to the throne, and as a father protecting what mattered most. Reports from insiders revealed that the meeting grew heated behind closed doors. Sharp words were exchanged. Tensions erupted that had long simmered beneath years of royal restraint. At one point, Charles allegedly accused William of undermining the family from within. William, unmoved, responded with a line that has since echoed through palace walls: "You cannot protect both the crown and those who desecrate it." What followed was even more significant. William began laying the groundwork for a move long speculated, but never confirmed, establishing a more autonomous royal household, one not tethered to Camilla's influence or the constraints of the current hierarchy. It would mean taking greater control over his public engagements, staff appointments, and decisions surrounding his children. It was a bold step, but one that signaled a new era of leadership. Clear, deliberate, and unafraid of fallout. Camilla, upon learning of the confrontation, was said to be livid. Her fury wasn't quiet. She viewed William's actions as a betrayal, a power play orchestrated to strip her of relevance. "They're trying to erase me," she reportedly told her inner circle. For someone who had clawed her way through years of vitriol and scandal, this attack, this deeply personal rejection from within the family, cut deeper than anything the public had ever thrown her way. And yet, what might have once rallied the family around her now brought only silence. Princess Anne, always sharp in judgment, remained conspicuously quiet. Prince Edward, diplomatic by nature, offered no defense. The support Camilla once commanded was thinning, and the lines of loyalty were becoming clearer by the day. The royal family was dividing not across titles but truths. But the ultimate blow didn't come from William, nor Catherine. It came from within the very walls Camilla once controlled. They packed their things quietly. No grand statements, no fiery speeches. But when the royal rota received over a dozen resignation letters in 1 week, all tied to Camilla, Britain knew something had snapped. The staff had spoken, and their silence was over. The departures came like a domino chain, swift, deliberate, unmistakably coordinated. From longtime personal assistants to senior advisors and scheduling officers, those closest to Queen Camilla's daily operations suddenly vanished from her ranks. To outsiders, it looked like a simple reshuffle. But those within the palace knew better. This was not a clean administrative adjustment. This was mutiny. Each resignation carried the weight of years of tension, finally breaking free from the confines of forced loyalty and fear. And then came the detonating blow: an anonymous letter, leaked to a major newspaper, that shattered whatever narrative the palace hoped to maintain. It read, simply, "We serve the crown, not cruelty." The line was brief, but its implication cut deeper than anything Camilla's team could deflect. For 72 hours, her press office went completely dark. No denials, no clarifications, no spin. The silence was deafening. As news outlets across Europe and the Commonwealth ran front-page headlines about the Queen Consort's collapsing support, the damage spiraled into something even the palace couldn't contain. "Queen Camilla loses palace allies," declared one. "Mass walkout sparks crisis at court," read another. It was no longer about a family dispute. It had become a symbol of division within the monarchy itself. Meanwhile, something remarkable was happening behind the scenes. Catherine's household, which had long operated with quiet efficiency, saw a surge in new talent. Staff who once felt stifled, unappreciated, or morally torn under Camilla's command now found refuge in Catherine's camp. Requests for reassignment poured in. Those who moved described her team as a safe haven, where integrity and compassion took precedence over power plays and intimidation. In quiet corners of the palace, the lines were redrawn not just by protocol, but by principle. And everyone knew where the momentum was shifting. Internally, Camilla's reputation was in free fall. Senior royals stopped defending her in private. Charles, already bruised by the growing tension with William, found himself isolated between a wife under siege and a son demanding reform. The balance he had clung to for years was gone. What remained was a fractured house, a splintered court, and a queen consort whose authority now rested on crumbling foundations. With the staff gone and the family fractured, there was only one thing left: Camilla's final move. She never apologizes. Not to the press, not to the family, not even to the public. But in a hushed room filled with tension and unresolved rage, Queen Camilla uttered words she'd never spoken before. The question is, did anyone believe them? The room was still when she entered, the air brittle with silence. It wasn't a formal affair, no grand palace hall, no press coverage, just a private family gathering arranged under the guise of reconciliation. But everyone present knew the truth: this was not peace. This was the palace's last attempt to stop the bleeding. At the center of it all sat Charlotte, guarded but composed, with Catherine on one side and William on the other. And across from them, the woman who had, until now, denied, deflected, and dismissed what had become the most destabilizing fracture in the monarchy in years. Camilla took her seat slowly, her gaze unreadable, her voice low. And then, in what felt like an admission dragged from the depths of palace pressure, she offered an apology. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears. Her words were measured: "If anything I said was hurtful, I regret it." But those who witnessed it said the moment rang hollow, cold, almost rehearsed. There was no tremble in her tone, no visible remorse, only the weight of a woman forced to retreat. Charlotte didn't respond. Not a flinch, not a word. She looked straight ahead, refusing to engage in the performance. Catherine offered nothing more than a nod, sharp, brief, final. A mother's way of saying, "This changes nothing." King Charles, seated at Camilla's side, looked visibly shaken. Sources say he offered no defense. No attempt to excuse or reinterpret. Perhaps even he had grown weary of the damage, of the widening chasm his silence had deepened. For once, the monarch appeared not in control, but caught in the storm of choices he hadn't dared to confront. And as the family sat in that suffocating stillness, it became clear to everyone present this was no resolution. It was an ending disguised as diplomacy. Behind the scenes, the impact of Camilla's apology or lack thereof was immediate. It didn't undo the resignations. It didn't erase the damage to her standing. If anything, it solidified her new reality. Where she once wielded quiet power, she now stood on fractured ground. Within palace circles, her diminished role became understood without needing to be announced. Doors no longer opened with urgency. Briefings became shorter. Her presence, while still protocol, no longer commanded reverence. For William and Catherine, the moment was symbolic. Not a victory, but a reckoning. They had fought silently, strategically, and for one reason only, to defend their daughter's dignity. And now, with the truth laid bare, they moved forward not with revenge but with resolve. But even as the dust settles, the wounds remain. And within the palace walls, trust may never be restored. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.